The topic which I have chosen to speak today, temple forms of the Chalukyas of Badami, is a huge topic, a topic which has been researched for over nearly 150 years now, and a lot of information has been forthcoming since the in recent years. And we have perhaps those who are acquainted with the temples of the Deccan, or rather development of Indian temples, may have often heard about some of the temples like Lad Khan, which was considered once as the prototype for Indian temples, which developed later into Nagara, Dravida, and other forms. But today's research today's research places us on a different level, and I'm not very sure whether I will be able to present all the information which you wish to hear from me today, but I will try my best. And to understand these temple forms, first of all, we have to take note of the political and religious background for these temples. Now, look at this map in which I have dotted the regions as well as places of importance. And all these regions are in fact important for understanding the architecture of the Deccan during the 6th and 8th centuries times. And particularly if you come to the peninsular part of India, if you are able to see here my cursor, this area, this region known as Karnataka, which spread from the Godavari region in the north to the Kaveri region in the south. In between that region, which we normally call Deccan, this has been the Kannada-speaking area for from about the 5th century onwards, and it is a area which is exposed not only to the region north of this Godavari, which comprises of your region of Ajanta, Ellora, etc. And beyond the Narmada River here, we have the region of Malwa, with Ujjain as the center. The Lato region is there. And to the east, you have the Koshala region, and even Kalinga region is there. All these regions have played a very significant role in the development of the temple architecture in the region, what I call Karnataka region, what is now known as Karnataka, which has a smaller geographical area compared to one it had during before the 9th century. Okay, now I will first just highlight the important political events of this dynasty, which has contributed a lot to the development of temple architecture, particularly in stone. The emergence of the dynasty is noticed in 543 CE, when Pulakeshin first founded Badami in today's Bagalkot district of Karnataka as the capital. He fortified it and then began the activities of the Chalukyas in terms of art and architecture also in this particular place, which is Badami. Yeah, you can see. Then his successors, Kirtivarman I, Mangalesha, and Pulakeshin II, expanded the kingdom, and the borders of the kingdom were extended to that of an empire now, extending up to the Narmada River in the north and Kaveri in the south. You can see the whole of this region came under their control. And a very important event of Mangalesha's reign is that he conquered the Kalachuris of this area. Kalachuris were patrons of the Pashaputa Shaiva sect, and they have some of the temples which have in Ellora have been attributed to the Kalachuris, in fact, and there are influences from that region, as we will see later on. And from the time of Mangalesha onwards, you will notice that the northern kind of architecture, what we call Nagara tradition of architecture, it has made a firm root in the region around Badami. Okay. Then Pulikashin II, of course, you all know, was the king who defeated Harsha, his contemporary in north, and he was the person responsible for extending the empire's borders up to Narmada in the north and Talaka in this Kaveri region in the south. At the end of Pulikashin's second's rule, Chalukyas had to face a defeat from the side of the Pallavas, and in fact, the Pallavas occupied the capital Badami for nearly 12 years until Vikramaditya I, the son of Pulikashin II, reconquered the area and re-established the Chalukya authority over the region from Narmada to Kaveri here. Okay. That was between 654 and 681 he ruled. And during the reign of his successor Vinayaditya, you will notice that some exploits were made by the Chalukya rulers in the north, beyond the Narmada. In fact, they defeated the ruler of Malava, named Vajrata, as we know, and they had conquered this region of Lata, where they were able to establish a subsidiary dynasty known as Chalukyas of Navasarika. Okay, then after his reign, we have a very long reign of Vijayaditya from 696 to 734. It was a period of peace and stability. And you will notice that large number of temples come into existence during the period of Vijayaditya and his successor Vikramaditya II. Okay. Vikramaditya II was the last great ruler of the Chalukya dynasty, and after him, his son Kirtivarma II came to the throne when the decline started. And by 757, we noticed that the Chalukyas were replaced by the Rashtrakutas, who became the masters of the Deccan. It is also important to note certain developments in the field of religion and the religious inclinations of these rulers. One point that we have to make note of is the fact that the temples which we attribute to the Chalukyas, most of them are directly, patronized by the Chalukya rulers themselves, for which we have inscriptions and all that. So, though they are not of very great size, except a few, of course, so you can say medium-sized temples, you can say. These temples have a religious background under which they have come to the fore. To begin with, you see, Chalukyas were Smarta Shaiva inclination, and Cave 1 at Badami and the Devadroni at Mahakuta seem to suggest this, where there is no indication of any influence of Pashupata as such at the beginning. Then, at the time when Cave 2 was excavated, which is a Vaishnava cave, we have already evidence of emergence of Pashupata Shaiva religion here in this area slowly. In fact, an image of Lakulisha has been found in Cave 2 in Badami. Then we have the concept of Devadroni, which is a very important thing for the Chalukyan temple clusters, as we may call it. These Devadronis are basically royal temple complexes centered around a water body, like a natural spring or a river, for instance. Like, for example, we have Mahakuta, where we have an inscription of Mangalesha mentioning the Devadroni itself. And these are very significant sites for the Chalukyas because they had direct affiliations with them. They were bound to them in one way or the other directly. Okay. Then, if you look at the early rulers like Mangalesha and Pulikeshi II, We notice them described as Parama Bhagavatas, which means the devotees of Vishnu, actually. In fact, we have a couple of caves in Badami, Cave 2 and Cave 3, which are Vaishnava in affiliation. And Cave 3 in particular has an inscription of 578 AD. And it was executed in the reign of Kirtivarma first, but by his younger brother Mangalesha. Okay, and it is one of the most splendid cave temples that was excavated in the capital by the Chalukyas. Then, despite the fact that some of the rulers may have had inclination to Vaishnavism, you will notice that they were broad enough in their attitude to patronize other religious sects like Shaiva, etc. And that is evident from their inscriptions. And the emergence of sun cult seems the sun cult seems to enter the Chalukya region during the reign of Pulikeshi II. Interestingly, you will notice, for example, the Malagiti Shivalaya, which may be attributed in Pulikeshi II's reign, is a sun temple. And we have later on many other sun temples, particularly in Aihole. Okay. And very significant change that you would notice is in the reign of Vikramaditya I. In 659, he was initiated into a Shaiva sect, which we call Pashupata sect, by an initiation ceremony called Shivamandala Diksha. And having initiated into the religion, they assumed the title Parama Maheshwara, in contrast to Parama Bhagavata, which we notice in the case of Mangalesha, for instance. Okay. So Vikramaditya first becomes a Parama Maheshwara, that means a Pashupata Shaiva, by a religious initiation, as we know, and that happens in 659, which is 5 years after he came to the throne. Okay. That is a very important thing for us, because they chose certain certain sites like Alampur in Telangana, in modern Telangana, which was the second Devadroni of the Chalukyas, situated on the bank of the Tungabhadra river. And you will notice that in the reigns of Vikramaditya I, Vinayaditya and Vijayaditya, that is between 654 and 713, a large number of temples have been built here, most of them royal temples. Okay. And the most famous of them are called Navabrahmeshwara temples. And these are very significant for the Chalukyan temple studies, because they indicate the emergence of a new Nagara or northern tradition into that region first, and it spreads to an extent to the home region of the Chalukyas around Badami region also. Okay. Patadakal, which is the last of the significant Chalukya temple sites, can be considered as the last Devadroni, because all the temples here, major temples here, were constructed by the kings or queens or princes. Okay, that is what we know from inscriptions also. And this Patadakal region is assumed importance from the time of Vijayaditya. He built a temple in his own name there, named Vijayeshwara, and up to Kirtivarman first time, it had its importance of its own. Now, this map should show you the way in which the interactions are taking place here. This is the Badami, this is the Malaprabha river, you are seeing. Okay, this is Badami, and this is Alampur, which I mentioned just now. But now, to this region, you will notice that influences are coming from outside and sometimes going from here too. For example, from Malava region, we have influences, particularly in the form of sculptural style, of which we may be able to see one or two. Then you have actually a Shaiva Acharya coming from Varanasi region to Patadakal. That evidence is also there. And this Kosala region, as I told you, which was the region of the high hairs or the Kalacharis, that has played an important role because matrimonial alliances were there between the Chalukyas and the Kalachuris. And that brought a lot of things relating to Shaivism, Pashuputa Shaivism in particular, into this region. And some of it also went to Kalinga and partially influenced the region of Alampur, and from there again to the region of Badami, you will notice the influences. And in early stages, you will also notice that there are influences in style from the Ellora region or Elephanta region coming into Badami region. Okay, so at the fag end of the Chalukya rule, you will also notice the influence from the Kanchi region, which was the capital of the Pallavas. Now, let us consider the question of situating the Deccan in temple architectural map of the pre-Chalukya northern tradition. We'll also consider architectural traditions in the Deccan and centers of Chalukya temples here. So if you look at the way in which the temple architecture has developed before the rise of the Chalukyas elsewhere, that is to say in northern parts of India, these are some of the things which we can list out as very important features. For Gupta period, for example, you have Nagara Pitha, or the basement of the northern order, which consists of a Jadhya Kumbha as the lowest element, a Tula Pitha. I will show you these, of course, these parts with illustrations. Tula Pitha, a Kumbha, a Kalasha, a Kapota. All these moldings are there in the Nagara Pitha, which you will see. And this Kalasha part is particularly important. It has just the form of a real pot, you would say, a real pot. And that distinguishes, of course, the Nagara Pitha from the Dravida Pitha, that I should mention here. Then pillars which have Ghatapallava or pot foliage as decorative aspects for lower and upper parts, that is there. Then there is a well-decorated Dwarabandha, door frame, T-shape, with multiple shakhas. This is a very significant feature in the Chalukyan temples because they say in the extreme south or in the traditional Dravidian architecture, the Dwarabandhas are plain. They are not decorated. Okay. But here it is not so in the Chalukyan region. But this is actually developed in the Gupta period already in the north. Okay. Then there is an emphasis on Lalata Bimba, or the dedicatory block on the door frame, that is suggesting the religious dedication of the temple. Then there is presence of Ganga and Yamuna, either at the upper part of the Dwarabandha or at the Pedya or lower part of the Dwarabandha. The images will be there. Then in late and post-Gupta period, you will also notice Garuda Naga Shakha scheme being adopted for decoration of the Dwarabandha or door frame. Then the Shikhar is characterized by this Amalaka, Karnamalaka, Madhyalatam, Gavaksha, and partially split Gavaksha. These have become decorative motifs for the superstructure or Shikhara. And all this has happened during the Gupta and late Gupta period, or immediately post-Gupta period, as you would see. We'll see some examples of this. Nachana Kutara, for example, Parvati temple. You can see some of the features which I mentioned here, for example. This is a Nagara Pitha. Okay, I will show some detail of it later. Then look at this door frame, which is very well decorated, and you will find, of course, the images of Ganga and Yamuna here. Okay, and this pillar form with Kalash Purna, Ghatapallava, as we call it. This is there. It's a typical northern Indian feature, I would say, which will be used in Chalukyan context also, only for Nagara temples. Okay, this is what I call Nagara Pitha. This is actually not symmetrical, it is asymmetrical in the sense that upper part takes a immediate curve, okay, whereas the lower one is a slow slope, you would see, and thus taking into consideration these two parts, you will notice that it looks like a complete kalasha, okay, or pot. Okay, that is a very significant component in the Nagara Pitha, as I would call it, and that is there already in Bumra Shiva temple, for example, or even Nachna for that matter. This is the door frame of the Nachna Kutara temple. You can see the details here. Okay, this is what I called Ghatapallava. Okay, this is also Ghatapallava. These become essential see components of northern pillars, particularly the Nagara pillars. As I would call them, and you will find their application even in Chalukyan context. Only, of course, in the Nagara temples or northern style temples. You have, of course, Ganga and Yamuna on either side here, what is called the Pedya region of the Dwarabandha. Okay, and that will, of course, come in the region of Chalukyas also at one particular point of time. This is, of course, the images of Ganga and Yamuna, as you can see. Then the Devgarh Dashavatara temple, reconstruction of which is a significant one for us, for it uses the Nagara features very clearly here. Okay. So, for example, this is what I call the Madhyalata. Okay. This is what I call the split Chaitya arch. Okay. Or Gavaksha, split Gavaksha as we call it. It's actually cut and pulled on either side to make it a wider one. Okay, this is a peculiar decorative motif which you will see in the northern style temples, particularly on the Lata and other parts. Okay, then these are what we call Karnamalakas. Okay, they are there, and this is the main Amalaka and the Kalasha over that is there. And this door frame, which is T-shaped, is a very significant aspect of the Gupta temple, as you all know. And this is a Nagara feature, I would say. Okay. So these are the things which we notice in the Gupta and late Gupta and immediately post-Gupta temples in the north region. Now coming to the Deccan again, let us assess the situation here in terms of geography and its relation to the architectural tradition. Now, we have this larger circle which I have drawn. Of course, it's not an exact a connotation of the region which I want to say. It is North India in general, you can say. This is the home of the Nagara tradition or Northern Indian tradition of temples. And this other one, the peninsular India, which goes up to the tip of the Kanyakumari. This is the region what we call as Dravida. This region is identified particularly by Dravidian speaking people. The languages like Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, Tulu, Malayalam are spoken here. Okay, such languages are spoken here. In Karnataka, of course, it is Kannada language that prevails. Okay, and this region in between, what I have marked as interface zone, is actually representative of the interface of the region where you find both the traditions being represented in art and architecture. So that is a very significant aspect of this particular region. So this Badami, Alampur, and other complementary sites which are there in these regions, they, you see, embrace all the traditions. Sometimes they also try a sort of intermixture of these temple styles, which we'll try to see later on. While we examine the northern one, what is the situation so for the southern or Dravidian tradition about the time of the rise of the Chalukyas? Now, the southern architectural tradition is aware of the use of basic geometrical forms. So we have square, rectangular, circular, raps-ended plan forms which have been used here in this region. And they have been used at least from the Satavahana times onwards. Okay. And Most of these structures were of brick and mortar, as we know, and it's only during the time of the Chalukyas that we notice extensive use of stone for temple architecture. Otherwise, it is what we have is only brick and mortar structures remaining. Most of them in only in basement. Okay. Then excellent examples of these various forms are known from Nagarjuna. Uh, by the time of the Chalukyas, you'll notice that southern and northern traditions had reached forms and details distinguishable from one another. That means they have built up their own characteristics. You can distinguish a southern temple from a northern temple very clearly by the time the Chalukyas of Badami have come to the power. And this Badami Chalukya and Pallava temples are witnesses to this statement. Then this northern and southern traditions had a longer stay in the Deccan before arrival of the Chalukyas. That means even before the Chalukyas arrived here and started their construction activities, you will notice that northern tradition was also there, particularly as an extension of Vakataka and all that in the Deccan. You notice that some of the sculptures noticed in the Kadambas, that is pre-Chalukya period in Karnataka, they betray a Gupta style in them. Then the southern traditions have their own distinction. You can identify a southern temple very easily from a northern temple, for instance. And these traditions had a very long stay in the Deccan even before the arrival of the Chalukyas. So what we see in the Chalukyan temples is not the first temples of these kinds. They are only stone temples replacing the earlier the brick and mortar tradition. So they have survived, and they feel that they are the earliest. We feel that they are the earliest, but they are not. They are not the earliest. They have a very good background, a long-staying background, we can see. Then the southern Dravida forms had encompassed a region as far north as the river Godavari. That is also a significant thing. So as late as the later Chalukyas, or even Rashtrakutas and later Chalukyas, you will notice some temples of the Dravida tradition being built in the region up to Godavari. So I'm showing you a temple called Trivikrama Temple in Ther in Maharashtra. Okay, and this temple I'm showing you, it is an apsidal temple. I'm showing it particularly because it betrays the southern architectural tradition. Okay, I have illustrated here the Nakula Sahadevarata from Mahabalipuram, which can be easily compared to this temple. This is a single story temple, whereas this is a double story temple. So some details vary, but otherwise, these pilasters which you are seeing, what are called the Kudyastambas in our texts, the southern texts, these are a very significant feature of southern architectural tradition. The presence of these is an indication of the southern architectural tradition. Okay. So that is how we see even the region of Godavari already you have this southern tradition prevailing. And here in the same places you have also Rashtrakuta temple, brick temples, which are built in typical South Indian style. Okay, that is there. And to show that before the arrival of the Chalukyas, these architectural traditions were there. I'm showing a recently excavated site known as Halashi in Belgaum district of Karnataka, which is a apsidal temple dedicated to Narasimha. We have found a Narasimha image here. And interestingly, this compares very well with the Durga temple, which is famous at Aihode, attributed to the Chalukya period. Okay. So such tradition is already there, and this has come down to us at least from the time of the Satavahanas that you have to remember. I'm showing this rathas from Mahabalipuram here. These are monolithic temples, but they exemplify the basic temple forms of the Dravidian region, which have a bearing in turn on the complex temples which we notice in the Dravidian region. So this is a very simple hut-like structure you can see here. It's a monolithic temple known as Draupadi Ratha. We technically call it Kutakara temple. So you have a oblong temple here with two longer sides, okay, opposite sides being longer. And this has a wagon vault roof, as you can see. And this is what we call the Shalakara temple in southern tradition. Okay. And this one is, of course, the apsidal one, which I showed you. See, these three temple forms, square, oblong, and the apsidal, have a very significant place in the structure of the southern temples. This is, of course, the close-up of Nakula Sahadeva Ratha, the apsidal temple, comparison to the elephant being given here with an rock-cut elephant by the side of it. Okay. It's called Gajaprishta temple. So these are the things again: Kutakara temple, the Shalakara temple, and we have the apsidal temple, okay, or Gajaprishta temple. Now about the centers of the Chalukya temples. I have already demarcated this region many times in the earlier maps. This is a close-up of the map. First one is the capital, Badami. It is a capital and it has some temples with Chalukyas. And you will notice that there are cave temples this region. Central to the capital is of this large tank, which is called Agastya Tirtha. And it was a very important perennial source of water. It has been throughout, even during the Chalukya period, it was like that. Okay. And on this area, which is called North Fort area, you have some of the very early Dravidian style temples of the Chalukyas. Okay. These are the caves which we have. I will show you close-ups of that. So this is the first inscription of the Chalukyas located in the North Fort area, which mentions about the construction of the fort at Badami in 543 by Pulakeshin I. This is the close-up of the area of caves. You can see one, you can see another here. This is a natural Buddhist cave. This is the third cave, the largest one, of course, and there is also a fourth cave here. Okay. So these are exactly opposite the Chalukyan fort area. And second site is that of second site is the Devadroni complex at Mahakuta, which is very near Badami, just 5 kilometers away. And this is the Devadroni water body, which serves as a sacred location for building temples around. There are two very significant temples here, known as Mahakuteshwara and Mallikarjuna, one on this side and one other on this side, and smaller temples in northern order as well as Vamsana order. Okay. But the significance of this site is that it is a royal site, as we know from the inscription of Mangalesha, dated 597, in which this Devadroni is mentioned. And the grants given for the temples here is also given. This is the site of Hayode, and the distinction of this site lies in the fact that it was a mercantile town. A traders guild known as Ayavale 500 existed here, and it played a very significant role in the history of commerce in the whole of South India. And as late as 17th century, you find references to that Ayavale 500 guild. Now, it was also a agrahara, and unlike the other Chalukyan sites which you mentioned, this is, of course, a distinct one, because here you have this agrahara area, this one, okay, here the Jaina complex area, where you have Jaina cave, Jaina temple called Meguti temple here, and also a Buddhist one here. Okay. And outside this fortified area, you will notice that some cave is here, and some temples, scattered temples are there. So this is the Malaprabha River actually, which flows northward by the side of the Aihole, and it is joined by a small stream, which is a seasonal stream actually, and hence it becomes a Sangama, a sacred spot also. So, though there are some inscriptions of the Chalukyas and monuments of the Chalukyas, very significant monuments are there, it has a distinct quality of being an Agrahara site with other sects also surviving around. Okay, that is the significance of this site. And coming to another site, this is Alampur, which is also a royal Shaiva center, I would call it, on the Tungabhadra bank. It is middle phase, that is, say, from 659 onwards, number of temples were built here up to 713 by the Chalukya rulers, Chalukya queen, Chalukya princes, etc. They have inscriptions. And a very significant aspect of this site is that it is a Pashupata site. And the temples are Pashupata temples. In fact, Lakudisha representations are found on the doorframe itself in some of the temples. And, and they were erected in the names of kings and queens and princes. Okay. And the famous temples here are, of course, the Brahmeshwara temples. 9 temples named Brahmeshwara. Okay, and this one is the Vishwabrahma temple, you can see, which is probably the last of the temples to be built by the Chalukyas in Alampur. Okay. So the last of the Chalukya Devadrunis, you can say, Royal Shaiva Center sites is Patavakal, which is a World Heritage site. You will see the cluster here of the temples in which you, for which you see the forms used are the Dravidian form like this, and the Nagara form or the northern form like this, and so on and so forth. Okay, so these are the sites which we have, and there are two kinds of religious edifices: caves and structural temples. But our concern will be structural temples, which have external form details for our discussion. Okay. So I'm just showing you on a slide showing the caves of the Chalukyas. So this one is the first cave, the Shaiva cave. This is the third cave, which is the largest cave at Badami. There are also 2 more caves here. One of Vaishnava affiliation and one of Jaina affiliation. Then there are a couple of caves in Aihole also. Okay. And there are structural temples built in Dravidian tradition, for instance, and Nagara northern tradition also. Okay. Now we come to the question of 4 principal temple forms, which we designate as Dravida, Nagara, Vamsana, and Gajaprishta. In fact, Gajaprishta is not exactly independent form. It will be a part of either Dravida or the Nagara one. But because of its peculiar plan, we may distinguish it as a separate temple form. We'll notice the components of these of temples and to an extent the development of these temples between 6th and 8th centuries. The 5 temple forms which I have illustrated here. In fact, this is the Dravida one, the southern one as we call it, represented here by the Sangameshwara temple at Pattalakal, built by Vijayaditya. This is the Rekha Nagara Prasada, or in general called Nagara Prasada. Okay. The curvilinear feature you can notice here, and the details of the superstructure itself is also very distinct. And this one is the Vamsana temple form, which is simpler, but it seems to owe to the Nagara temple form in its details, such as in, for example, in the Amalaka, which you can notice in both the cases. Amalaka is a very distinct feature of the Nagara temple form. We'll have some details of this later. And this is the Gajaprastha, or elephant-backed type temple. Here, of course, having a Nagara Shikhara. Yes. And I have distinguished this temple, which is a very significant temple, as Sabha temple, meant for congregation, religious, socio-religious functions, etc., as we know from the inscriptions on them. This is an unconventional one, I would say, because it is not repeated elsewhere in the Chalukya region, because its specific purpose was different than normal worship. Okay. Let us begin with the Dravidian structural temples. I will just show you the parts of the Dravidian temples here. First, uh, start with the Adhisthana, the basement. Okay. Then you have Pada or the wall. It's also called Jangha. Okay. Then Prastara is the roof area. Okay. Then Griva is the neck-like portion, which you can see here. Okay, which distinguishes the upper part, what we call Shikhara in southern Indian context. And the Stupi is the Kalasha which is atop this Shikhara. Okay. So these are six in number, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that is why simple temples of Alpavimana, as they call them in southern context, they are called Shadvarga temples. Shadvarga means having vertical components. Okay. Or there are temples which have more than one story. When you see the number of vargas goes on increasing by 2. For example, this is Ashtavarga temple. Two more additional, two more stories being there. So again, here you have Adhisthana and Bhitti, Prastara, Griva, Shikhara. Stupi is missing here. Okay, those 6 components are there. Okay, principal components, and you have certain Dravidian features, as I call this. Kudyasthamba, for example, these small pilasters which you see on the walls, these are called Kudyasthambas, and they are distinct feature of the southern temple tradition. And again, this Prastara with Hara is a very distinct element of the southern temple, and it consists of what we call the edicules of Kuta, that Draupadi temple you might remember. I will show you again. Then the Shala, you can see here, the wide wagon vault roof temple model. These are components of the Hara, and they define the end of a story. So as many number of haras you have, that will be the number of stories of the temple also. Okay. Then here, in fact, you have 3 haras. They're making it a 3-story temple, or Tritala Vimana, as we call it. So for the horizontal components in plan are concerned, you have a face, Mukha Chatushki, which is a simple one, and Guda Mantapa is a closed hall, you can say, closed with, on all sides with entrance on one side. Okay, this is a Guda Mantapa. Then this is the Vimana proper, okay, which represents the Garbhagriha interiorly and in its external form. Okay. Now this is the Draupadi Ratha, which is the base for the Kuta Adicule. This is the Bhima Ratha. You can see the oblong plan of it. Okay, and this is for Shalakara representations, and this is of course the Nakula Sahadev Ratha Gajaprishta representations. Some of the details of the the superstructure of the southern temples I have given here. This is the Hara portion, Kuta and Shala. This is called Mahanasi, or the great nose, you can say. And the space between Kuta and Shala is called Harantara. And this is the Shikhara, which can be square, octagonal, or hexagonal, or circular. And we have all the 3 models in the context of the Chalukyas of Badami and the Stupi here. Okay. So how this Hara component represents the Kuta, Panjara or apsidal temple, Shalakara temple, again Panjara here and another Kuta here. I have given the models here below to show the relation to the real temple form. Okay. This one is apsidal, this one is square, this one is oblong one. Okay. So again, that repetition of the scheme is there. The plans are also given here, square, apsidal, and rectangular. Okay. So these are the edicula used for the Chalukyan temples, South Indian type temples. This being optional, that is the Panjara or apsidal temple form being applied in a complex temple of the South Indian variety. It is a optional one. I'm showing you what a edicule means. Okay. This is a Kuta edicule. This is Kuta actually, part of Haran. But if you bring it down up to the basement, you will notice that it will represent a complete square temple. Likewise, this is the Shala, the oblong one. Okay, from bottom to top, it will represent a Shala edicule, a, a independent rectangular temple with wagon walled roofs, as I have shown here. So that Panjara or the apsidal one is optional. That has not been used here. This is a Chalukyan temple called Malagiti Shivalaya, dedicated to sun in Badami. These are the details of the base or Adhisthana part of a Dravida temple. You have Upana as the lowest molding, then Jagati is there, then Kumuda is there. It is a symmetrical molding. It may be circular, it may be octagonal, and so on and so forth, multifaceted. Then Gala is a neck actually. It is going behind. You can see. Then Kapota is a significant component. Then Makara Pattika, a garland of makaras or vyalas, you can see vyalavari or makarapatika. That is also a component. So above that you will find bhitti or pada. So in the case of the Dravidian temples, depending upon the shikhara form, shape, that is square. If it is square, it will be called Nagara Vimana. If it is circular, it will be called as Vesara Vimana. If it is octagonal, it will be called a Dravida Vimana. So these are represented in the Chalukyan temples themselves. So this one, for example, at Patadakal, this one at Badami, and this one, of course, again at Patadakal. So there is one component which comes as an addition to the southern form, which is not actually a southern component. It's called Shukanasa. It is a northern style see component actually. We introduced it in the Nagara tradition, but here you will notice that Shukanasa has been adopted in the last stage. So one of the last Dravida temples to be built in Patadakal, and that is added here. And its presence, of course, shows a Antarala below inside. That is an
Sir,
interesting.
excuse me, sir. Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Could you please define again Koot Sal Panjar in this temple?
Pardon?
Koot Shala Panjar. Koot Shala
Ah,
Panjar. Could you please
yes, yes,
define
yes.
in this temple, sir?
Yeah, yeah, certainly. See, what you are seeing here, can you see my cursor? Are you able to see the cursor?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No. So I'm showing you a quota actually. The last one, the quotas will be normally at the corners because it has to be symmetrical always. It is square. Okay. In between, you have a shala here, wider one, we can see. And in between shala and the quota, you will have this apsidal temple form. Okay.
Oh,
It's
oh,
called Panjara.
okay, sir. Okay, sir. What is the mean of Koot Shala Panjar? Can you define, please?
Kuta is a square temple. Okay, it's a square temple, hut-like one. I showed you the Draupadi Ratha. Okay, then
Okay, okay.
Shala is a wagon walled roof temple. Okay, uh, it is oblong in shape. Okay, it's rectangular in shape, and so it has a wagon walled roof. I'll just show you again. You can see this is a Kuta. The
Yes,
Kuta.
yes, yes, sir. Yes,
This
sir.
is the
Okay, okay, sir.
Chalakya temple. This is a Panjara model. Okay, upsidal one. That is there in this case also. Okay. Am I clear that? Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Now it looks. I think it will take a lot of time. Shall I continue? Okay.
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Please continue, sir.
Take more than half an hour, I suppose. Okay. I'll try to be quick, but I will just show this. This is perhaps one of the earliest Dravidian temples to be built by the uh, built in the region of the Chalukyas. Okay, you can see it represents a Alpa Vimana. Okay. Nirandhara, because it doesn't have a internal pradakshina patha. Okay. And it is Nagara because its roof or shikhara is actually square. Okay. So that makes this Alpa Vimana a Shadvarga temple, a very simple one, assigned to 6th century. Okay. And the square pillars are called Rajaka pillars, are a very characteristic of the temples of the Chalukyas, particularly built in southern India. So this one is Banantigudi. These are small temples of the beginning, and this is from Mahakuta. Actually, it's a double-story temple. Unfortunately, this there's all these trees are hiding it. Otherwise, it is just like the one which I showed you earlier, but it has a second story also over it. And this has real comparison with another temple which we'll see called Upper Shivalaya. This is a royal temple, certainly. It can what a characteristic of the royal temples of the Chalukyas is that they have a internal pradakshina patha. Okay, you can see here. When the pradakshina patha is there, you can take that it has been directly patronized by king or queen or some very important royal person related to the royal house. Okay, that's a very significant aspect of it. And what is important about this temple? This is, I would say, a 6th century temple, one of the earliest Dravidian temples to be built by the Chalukyas themselves. It is at Badami, and it is on the summit of the North Fort, within the fortified area, which I said, you see, was the fort area was built in 543. In that, it is found, okay, on the top of that. And what is important here is that the second story is given emphasis, just like the first story, though it is not of that same height. But when it comes to the third story, it is reduced. So successively, reduction in the height of the stories is a very important characteristic of this particular temple, and it is so in the case of the early Dravidian temples of the Chalukyas. And it has a Nagara Shikhara, you can see, it's a square one. And now it's the close-up of the Shikhara part of it. These are called Mahanasis, as I said. This is the Griva part of it. Okay. An interesting feature of this is what is called a Kapota Panjara. Okay. A Kapota Panjara is a offset representing something like a Devakosta, whose superstructure of apsidal form reaches actually the Kapota part of the Kapota part of the temple. Okay, so this is the Kapota part, and it is actually carved here. It forms part of this particular aedicule, you can see. Okay, so this is a very interesting feature which is not repeated in other Chalukyan temples. That's why I have shown you. This is Malagiti Shivalaya around 625. It's a very interesting Dravidian temple in the sense that there is almost nothing which is northern about it. All the features are southern features. But for, you can see another close-up of that here. We know the architect of this temple, Aryamanchi Upadhyaya. Okay. On this very beautiful grill with Makara Torana is also noteworthy feature here. And these sculptures, there are two sculptures in particular, one of Vishnu and one of Shiva. I'm showing you the Shiva sculpture here, which is in actually Malava style. Okay. This sculpture is in Malava style. It's a very interesting thing that a southern temple has this kind of a sculpture. You can see here, for example, in the Trishula, an Amalaka here. Okay, can find such a late Gupta images in Malava region. Okay, how it has come here is an interesting aspect to know. Coming to Ayhole, we have this famous Jaina temple called Meguti Jaina temple on the summit of a hill, of course, and it has inscription of 634. You can see the inscription is here actually, and it is a Dravidian temple. You can see what are the features of Dravidian temple. I have already shown you. These offsets are there, regular offsets. This is a Kuta offset Kuta edicule offset. This is a Shala edicule offset. Again, Shala edicule and a Kuta one at the corner. Okay. Then you have these Kudyasthambas. You have these Kudyasthambas. Okay. Kudyasthambas means wall pillars. That's the meaning of it. Okay. And they define the offsets actually. Okay. See, for each offset at the corners, you have these Kudyasthambas. Okay. Then you have the Prastar. Unfortunately, the details are gone. There is a Vadamala is there, okay, or Makarapattika is there. The roof has collapsed. And second story was there, as we have in some Jaina temples. This is the inscription of Pulkeshi II, famous Ravikirti's composition, 634, on the wall of this temple. And let's look at the details of the plinth of this. So this is what is called Upana, and this is Jagati, and this is Kumuda, which is octagonal here. This is called Tripatta Kumuda, and this is Griva or Gada. Okay, then you have this Kapota with nasis decorated with faces and all that. Okay, so typical Dravidian type of structure. So the distinction is that this will not be symmetrical in northern style temples. It will not be symmetrical. Here it will be symmetrical invariably. So an interesting temple in Mahakuta we have, Mahakuteshwara. It was a royal temple, there is no doubt about it. We have inscription of Mangalesha on that. But interesting aspect of this is that it is a mix of northern and southern tradition. For example, a Kuta edicule at the corner is not complete. These are not complete at all. These offsets should come here on the wall also and the Adhisthana also for a southern temple, but it is not there here. Only central offsetting is there. A Shala you will find here. Central offsetting is there, and that edicular formation is there only for the center of the wall. What we call Bhadra portion, central Subhadra portion as they call it. Okay, but for the upper stories, you will see regular Kuta, Shala, and all that. Okay, Hara and all that. That is regularly found here. It has an octagonal shikhara, making it a Dravida Vimana. You can see it is a royal temple. It has an internal Pradakshina Patha. See the offsets here. No offsets at the corners. There should have been offsets at the corners, okay, for a Dravida temple. This is the close-up of the superstructure to show you how the Kuta Shala formations are there. And the octagonal shikhara is there in the stupi over that. I told you that there's a mixture of that. These are the details over the windows. Okay, and you can see the northern Nagara type of decoration here with Gavaksha, split Gavakshas, etc. Okay, particularly this is a split Gavaksha as I would call it. Amalaka you can see here, Ramalakas you can see here. Okay, so these northern features are adopted even for the window decoration, and for some of the windows you will have southern decoration also, like this Kuta, a Shala, and a Kuta again. Okay, so this kind of decoration is also there. So a kind of admixture is already seen here. Another temple in the same complex is again royal temple, Mallikarjuna temple as it is called now. Same features it has as the one which I just showed you, which was called Mahakuteshwara temple. Here also you see some mixture of these certain features. No edicules, Kuta edicules at the corners. Only Shala edicules are there at the central offsets. So this is an interesting temple from Alampur, where again that feature of central offset is there. Corner pilaster is there, but no edicule, complete edicule is there. An interesting feature is the Shukanasa, which has appeared for the first time for a southern Indian style temple. And of course, these details of this Mukha Chatushki are also Nagara type. Okay. But otherwise, it is a South Indian composition. You can see the Hara with Kuta, Shala, and Kuta. And it is repeated in other stories also. This is the Patalkal Sangameshwara temple built by Vijayaditya. It was called originally Vijayeshwara. You can see here that the Panjara edicule is not used. It is, as I told you, optional. So only Kuta, Shala, Shala, and again Kuta will be there, like this. The same temple again. Okay. So, but what has happened by this time is that this pyramidal elevation of the temple, stepped pyramidal elevation, has become very distinct, and you can notice each story very well distinguished uh, by this let's say retreat. Okay, it actually retreats, and next work is built over that. Again, it is a Nagara Sandhara Vimana, Tritala Vimana. You can say three-story Vimana. Okay, because it has an internal ambulatory inside it. So the plan has developed here. It has three additional entrances for the hall. That is a interesting development in Patalakal. You can notice. And this is, of course, the famous Virupaksha temple built by Queen of Vikramaditya II, known as Lokamahadevi. It was named originally as Lokeshwara. But the distinct feature of this one is, apart from the Dravidian features which are normal to all Dravidian temples like Kuta Edicule, Panjara Edicule, Shala Edicule, again Panjara Edicule and this Kuta Edicule, these are repeated in the next story also. This element, which I called Shukanasa, is an important feature here. So it always comes over a Antarada, and earlier Chalukyan temples do not have an Antarada. Okay. Only later Chalukyan temples have this Antarada, and therefore a Shukanasa here. But significance of this is that this feature becomes a regular feature in Karnataka from this time onwards. For example, in Ellora, you have that Kailasa that also has a Shukanasa. Later Chalukyan temples of Dravidian manner, they also have the Shukanasa invariably. But you will not find it in Tamil Nadu anytime. Okay. So that is a very significant development which we'll notice later. Okay. This is the plan of that temple. You can notice the scale on which it has been built. It is perhaps the only temple, surviving temple rather, I would say, with a prakara wall around it and a number of Parivara Devata alayas here. Okay. And this is the central temple. It has an internal Pradakshina Patha. It's a royal temple. And a Antarada here, as I showed, over which that Shukanasa has come. It is complete with a Nandi Mandapa and a Pratoli. And here you will have a river. Okay. You can notice the regular offsets here. This is a Kuta offset, actually. This is a Panjara offset. This is a Kuta offset, again Panjara and Kuta offset. Okay. I was showing this Panjara, that is apsidal form, right from top to the bottom. This is a complete apsidal temple, if you take it out. Okay, so that is a feature normally not found in Chalukyan temples. We know the architect of this temple, Sarvasiddhi Acharya. Okay, and probably his name was Gunda Anivaritachari, a royal architect. Okay, he was honored for constructing this temple. This is the other temple built by the junior queen of Vikramaditya II, Mallikarjuna temple. A significant thing that you have to notice is this circular shikhara, which makes it a Vesara Vimana. Okay, makes it a Vesara Vimana. So you have Dravida, Nagara, and Vesara Vimanas within the southern Dravidian style, all represented in the Chalukyan context. It's a close-up of that. Also a Shukanasa here. I come to the structural temples of northern style. This is just to give you an idea of how the northern style temple distinguishes itself from a southern style temple. This is the Mallikarjuna temple which I showed you. This is a Dravidian temple, whereas this is a Nagara, Rekha Nagara temple. Its curvilinear superstructure is hallmark of that, with the Karna Amalakas, Amalaka missing here. The Shukanasa is also there, you can see. But this one has a stepped pyramidal structure. These are the components of the Nagara temple. You can see you have the Pitha at the base. The Jangha is the wall. Okay. Then this is actually the Rekha Shikhara, as we call it, from this point to this point. Amalaka is there, Kalasha is there, and in between you will have a kada or neck portion. And these are special features of this Shikara itself. A Bhumi Khanda representing the story in this case, distinguished by a Karana Amalaka. Okay, this is a Karana Amalaka. You can see. So as many number of Karana Amalakas are there, that many number of stories have to be counted in a temple like this, which is called a Latina temple. Okay, and this is the Madhyalata, they called. Okay, this is the Madhyalata. Okay, and this Madhyalata will be there on all the four sides. See, and this is Shukanasa. Unfortunately, collapsed here. Okay. So this central sculpture which occupies on the Shukanasa is called a Lalata Nasi. It will have a image of the god who is installed inside the temple. Here is it Nataraja, so this is a Shaiva temple. This is Huchimalligudi. Okay. So there are roof types which I have to mention. We have to mention this Malle Chadya is a flat roof. You can see here, and Dandachadya is a sloping roof. This is a very common feature in Chalukyan temples, use of Mallachadya and Dandachadya. Okay, and in this case, this is Taravasappa temple from Aihole. Again, Nagara temple. What you have to notice is this one, what we call Tula Pitha. Okay, and these Kudya stambhas have been made use of here. This is a very, very interesting thing because it's a southern feature. Okay. This is a Dravida Pitha, sorry, Nagara Pitha as I would call it. Okay, northern style temple only have this kind of Pitha. You have a Kumbha which becomes a Jadya Kumbha later on, and this Kalasha you can see here that asymmetry of that. It is sloping here and suddenly takes an inverted turn. So this is the feature of a Nagara Pitha. And this Kapota will be there, this Nasi will be there, this Antarita will be there, this square block decorations along the interior side of the Kapota. So these will be there. So this is typical, as I showed you in the case of Nachana Kotara Pitha. So it's similar to that. Of course, this is later, and you see more finer details here. And how a Nagara Dwarabandha will be there, that also you can identify here. Okay, so Lalata Bimba is here. A T-shaped door frame is a very significant feature of the northern style temples. And Ganga Yamuna images in the Pedya, that will be there. Okay, and a Stamba Shakha which will have this Ghatapallava decoration, both at the top as well as at the lower end. Okay. This is called Uttaranga, of course. So in Mahakuta, we have a very simple northern style temple, which is a Sarvatobhadra temple in the sense that it is open on all the sides. It has a Nagara, Amalaka, Amalaka, which is crowning it. The Shikha, the Kalasha portion has fallen off, of course. But the pillar again is of northern form. It is not of southern form, it is northern form. This is in the Devadroni of the Mahakuta. So the pillar also, in the case of northern or Nagara temples, differs. You can see this kind of decoration, what is called hourglass decoration, making this one is like something like Gatapallava. Okay, then this capital or bracket, which is called Talapatra Potika. Okay, this is a northern feature. It doesn't occur in southern Indian style temples, even in the Chalukyan context. That has to be noted. This is what is called Tulapitha. Okay, this comes for the offsets of the exterior wall, and they will correspond. This portion will correspond actually to the Kalasha portion. Okay, of the Nagara Pitha. They will be normally decorated like this. You will have blocks. Tulapitha is a balanced pitha. That is what it actually means. And T-shaped door frame, which I mentioned here, you can, it's very clear here. Okay, and this decoration of northern style Amalakas and this Chaitya Kudus or Gavakshas, split Gavakshas forming a lace, etc. So this is a Bhadravalokana, again a feature of northern temples, but normally used in the case of Alampur temples. You can see the pillar form here. Gatapallava here also on either side, and the fluted pillar form decoration at the center, Malasthana. Okay, and this Talapatra Potika again is a northern feature. So Garaganatha temple at Pattakal is a significant temple built in very, very Puritan Nagara style, we can say. But what is interesting in the context of the temples in home region of the Chalukyas is that they have somewhat orthodox tradition, which is followed almost up to the later space of the Chalukyas. And this is one of the very early temples in Ayodhya, at least belonging to Pulakeshi's second reign, since we have inscription for it. How this structure is done, we can see. This is a Bhadra type of temple, Bhadra type of Nagara temple. Bhadra type of temple will have one offset at the center on each side of the wall. Okay, and Lata will follow it in the Shikhara. Okay, and the composition of this Shikhara itself is by horizontal layers. You can see each with decoration of these Chaitya arches, split Chaitya arches, etc. And Karnamalakas are there. Now, this separating this, you see, each layer is a characteristic of Ayodhya Nagara tradition. Okay. That's a very characteristic of that. You can see in this both cases that kind of a feature. This is Uchamali temple. So Uchapayaguni. So the plain wall is a feature of Nagara temple, and superstructure, of course, is same features which I've already discussed. The Mukha Chatushki is there. Fortunately, we have a inscription of the architect here. Swasti Jambu Dvipantare Kaschit Vastu Prasada Tadgataha Narasabha Samo Vidwan Nabhuto Nabhavishyati. Architect Narasabha praises himself as an architect par excellence, not excelled in the past and will not be excelled in the future. That kind of priding is seen, a kind of competition between the architects in this period. Now, this temple I am showing you in particular because its constitution in the Shikhara is somewhat different to the one which I showed you. I will show a close-up of that. You can see this one is the one I just now showed you. This is a traditional Ayodhya. What you will notice here is each layer is separate from by itself, whereas in this case, this second layer is touched by this arch, Chaitya arch, Argavaksha, and split arches. So this you will not see here. Actually, this one has to touch this one. This will be touching here. This is see what we see even in the temples of Alampur. A later development, I would say. So coming to Alampur, we have these temples. As I told you, it is a center of royal temples. All of them are Shaiva temples and dedicated by kings and queens. And this is perhaps the first temple to be built there. Vikramaditya first reign, the middle of the 7th century, and it is called Kumara Brahma. So that feature which I had just now shown you, you can see here also. Okay. That is the way in which you see this feature. What distinguishes these Alampur temples is the sharp curve of their shikhara. Okay. This will not be noticed in the traditional Chalukyan Nagara temples. It's not a very sharp curve. And that sharpness occurs because of this compressed karnamalakas, which look like cushions. Okay. This Bhumikanda is represented here, and Karnamalaka represents its end. Okay. So this close-up of that, you can see how this arch is going to the next layer. Okay. So interior, I told you, the northern type of pillars, Nagara pillars, this Talapatra Potika, okay, and this hourglass decoration. The door frame with the decorations of these Amalakas, etc. Fortunately, know an architect, Srikantacharya, from Alampur, whose name repeats many times there. This is the Swarga Brahma temple, which was caused for Queen Vinayaditya, Queen of Vinayaditya. Okay. So latter half of 7th century. What is interesting here is the arrangement of these pillars into pairs, just as in Gupta temples, where you see the space will be more, the space will be less. Okay, that is a intercolumnar spacing, as we call it, which is different, and it is more like Nagara tradition. So this is one of the last temples built in Alampur. All the details here. These Badras are there. Devakoshtas are there with Nagara type of pediment. Tulapitha you can see because it is the offset, and interspersing sculptures and all that. This is the Kalasha portion corresponding to which you have Tulapitha. T-shaped door frame. You can see Ganga Yamuna. The Shukanasa. This image is missing here. It's a Shaiva temple, of course. Look at the sharp curve here. Okay. Close up of that superstructure. Shukanasa here. And Lalatanasi. Close up of that. In another temple, of course. So this is a very enigmatic temple at Alampur at present, but originally it was situated in Kodavelli Sangameshwaram. It's one of the largest temples to be built in Telangana region by these Chalukyas. We don't know the pattern, but it certainly is a royal temple. Feature that is interesting is that it doesn't have a Shukanasa. Okay, that is a interesting feature, I would say. This large dimension is of course impressive. ASI Archaeological Survey of India has shifted that from about 25 kilometers away in an excellent manner and now rebuilt it in Alampur itself. Okay. This is the Gadaganatha temple. This is, you see, unlike the traditional Nagara temples which were built in the Chalukya region, such as at Aihole. This represents the Alampur tradition. Coming to Patadakal. Okay. Other temples which you see here are mixed types. Okay, they are smaller types, but temples, but mixed types that you can see here. But this is very, very pure architecture of northern style. You can see the door frame, wall, and plinth detail. This one I have already shown you details. So this local tradition, how Nagara tradition is there in Patadakal, you can see this mix of certain southern features here. For example, this Tripatta Kumuda is a southern feature which has been made use of here. Okay, this is a Nagara feature, a garland. Okay, like this, sometimes mixture of that is done. That is probably work of local artists, you can say. This one is the last temple which is to be considered by us so far as Nagara tradition is concerned. What is peculiar to this is that though this Nagara superstructure is there, the detail of the first story in some respects has some Dravidian features. For example, this Hara feature is never a Nagara feature. You can see Shala, Kuta, Panjara, etc. here. This feature is Dravidian feature. Okay, that has been made use of here for the first story. And there are pilasters, so what I call Kudyasthambas, you can see, that have also been adopted here. Okay. And this, of course, is what I call Bhadravalokana, that is there on the three sides. This was the last temple, perhaps built during the reign of Kirtivarman II. It's a mixedium, as you can see. Such mixtures are seen even in the temples built in the Deccan region in later, particularly in Karnataka, in Nagara tradition. You can see some mixture of these things. This is the plan of the temple. I will not go into the details. Mahakuta, you have this traditional Aihole type of Nagara temple. You can see each of the layers is very distinct by itself. Okay. And of course, this Badra type of Nagara temple, single offset. This third form is the Pamsana or Pamsakara style. We have a few examples of this style. It's a simpler variety, and you can compare here with the Rekha Nagara with this Pamsana style temple. The resemblance is particularly this Nagara, it's Amalaka at the top, and the curvature of the superstructure. Okay, these are very distinct, and of course pillars are done sometimes in the northern style. So it's a variant of northern Nagara style, It has clearly defined stories or bhumis with Griva, Amalaka, and Kalasha. Its walls like Nagara Rekha Prasada are plain, you can see. Uh, but like Rekha Prasada, it may have Triratha plan. You can have an offset here when necessary. It is absent here, of course. Some temples do have that, making it a Triratha plan. In this case, it is a Ruchaka type of temple. If it has an offset, it would become a Bhadra type of temple. These are the components. You can see Pitha, Kantha, Kumbha, and Kapota will be there. Then Jangha, wall, plain wall. Kapota part is there. And these are bhumis actually. And they are represented by pillarets, small pillars forming shrines. Okay. And each succeeded by a kapota. So this makes a series of see kapota and jangha until it is reached here. You have skanda part here, gala, amalaka, and kalasha. Okay. So other temples of Pamsana order are so distinct. They are also found. Of course, we need not go into the details of them. They belong to the Pamsana order. So one interesting feature that we notice uh, in one of the examples in Ayodhya is that the last story of this Pamsana temple has Karana Malakas here. This is an interesting feature, and that in fact links it with the Nagara tradition. So this could be a very prototype of the Rekha Nagara temple, I would say, a prototype of that originally. This would be a Bhadra one because there will be offset here. You can see here a pair of pillars would be added here, and it will become a Bhadra type of temple. Okay. So in any case, the links of this Pamsana temple with the Nagara tradition is well established at Ayodhya, particularly by this temple called Gadaganath. We come to the Gajaprashtha or Gaja temples or apsidal temples. Okay. We have a few examples of this type of temple. One of them comes from Hale Mahakuta, which may be one of the earliest apsidal temples of the surviving temples of the Chalukyas. Okay. You can see the old photograph of that. It has been reconstructed recently. You can see this, how it looks now. Of course, unwanted things here. These are not Chalukyan features at all. So what you see is an apsidal temple of a modest form with Nagara decorations on its walls, like this split gavakshas, for example, they are there. And sloping roof, what I called the Danda Chatya, then the flat roof at the top, what I called Malla Chatya, okay, they will be there. And interior, you can see it has a Pradakshina Pratha, hence it is a royal temple. You would identify it. You can see T-shaped the door frame here, which makes it Nagara affiliation. Okay, and Talapatra Potika here, that is also Nagara tradition. You can see. And one of the best temples, surviving temples of the apsidal form is, of course, the Durga temple. This was originally at the top of this. It has a Nagara Shikhara that is interesting here, of course. And this tradition of raising the or joining the two layers is, again, as I told you, we notice it at Alampur, and it represents a later tradition. Okay. So interesting aspect of this temple is that apart from being a apsidal temple, it has a mixture of Nagara and Dravida. For example, the superstructure you can see is Nagara. This is the plan of the temple. You can see the plinth details. It is actually Dravidian. Okay. It's a Dravida Pitha. You have a Jagati, a Dharapatta Kumuda, multifaceted Kumuda is there, then a Kapota is there with Nasis, Namakara Patikaram, Valamala, you can see here. So these are features of a southern Pitha. So that mixture is seen right from bottom to top here, and in interior decorations also, such as, for example, you have here the southern Kuta, this Panjara and Kuta. Okay. Images of northern style are there, Madhava style, post-Gupta Madhava style, they are there. And again, southern one here. You can see door frame details with Shala, Kuta, and all that. There is also an apsidal temple in lilac-related form in Aihole. Only the entrance to the Gudamantapa remains now, and is dedicated to Shiva, of course. You can see the offsets. Okay. And components which are falling around show that it is also associated, affiliated with Nagara tradition or northern tradition. We come to the unconventional structures now. This one is the Ladkhan temple, which was once considered to be prototype for Indian temples. Okay. Unfortunately, we now know that it is not a very early temple at all. It is dated to around 700 AD now. What is characteristic of this temple is that it looks like a hall, village assembly hall rather. And these features, which are called the hood stones, they add a wooden structural look to that. And that is why they were compared to the Santhagaras and supposed to be early temple forms and all that. But we know that this temple was built like this because of a particular reason. It was used for socio-religious activities, and the inscription is here, which implies that it was used for performing of samskaras, for which separate fees were prescribed for each samskara. Okay, that is there. But interesting also is the fact that this is the only temple to carry the royal emblem of the Chalukyas. Okay, that is also an interesting feature. Interiorly, you can see a very big hall, a very big Mukhamantapa, and a small sanctum, which is obviously a later addition. And this also is a later placement. Otherwise, it is probably used for socio-cultural functions, what we call a sabha structure. So this is another view of that temple. This is the inscription which mentions the samskaras, for which separate fees are prescribed. This is the royal emblem, two royal emblems which you can see here. The figure of Yamuna, one of the pillars. There is also a Ganga figure also. And among these unconventional temples, there is also a Chikki Gudi, which is before 650 from its iconographic style. It is interesting because it doesn't have a superstructure. Okay. We do not know whether the Chalukyas had tradition of building superstructures with brick and mortar. If they used, none has survived so far, unfortunately. Okay. This is one of the temples, Nagara tradition. You can see interior, this Talapatra Potika type of brackets, door frame, T-shaped, and these split chaityas and all that. This is another temple, Huchappaya Matha it is called, and it represents the Nagara tradition, but it doesn't have a superstructure. Okay. It has a sanctum, but it doesn't have a superstructure. And this area, this region was open actually. So all this portion from here to here was open except pillars. There was completely, it was open. There was a Kakshasana also here. Okay. So this could be one of the structures which was used for traditional education, what we call matha. Okay, a matha. And this may be a Pashupata matha actually. And in fact, it is today also called Huchappaya Matha. This is another interesting temple. I will show you the plan. Superstructure is not there. The Kakshasana is there all around. It is open all around with a sanctum inside. Okay, this is how it is planned. Look at the rectangular plan of this. It is a Shakti temple actually. This rectangular plan was used either for Shaktis or reclining forms of gods like Anantashayana, etc. Here it has an inscription referring to the grants made to goddess Durga Bhagavati, who was there in this temple. And these Bhadras are there on the three sides. But details are Nagara. Okay, all these Nagara details are there. You can see that, including the T-shaped door frame, Ganga, Yamuna, and so on and so forth, and Gajalakshmi at the center, representing that this is the Shakti temple. Okay. This I am just showing for comparison, Bhuvaneshwar, Vaital Devul, what we call Vallabhi temples. And it is possible that this temple also had a Vallabhi superstructure over here. Okay. just possible. And what is the sequel then? We are coming to the last part of this lecture. Sequel to the Chalukya temple architecture in Deccan. The three temple forms, principal forms, continue in Deccan region until the 14th century, but only Dravida and Pamsana forms survived till post-Vijayanagara period. Even up to 17th, 18th century, you will notice that Dravida and Pamsana forms have been continued in Karnataka particularly, whereas by 14th century, the Nagara tradition has come to a stop. But they have been used, all the three, that is Dravida, Nagara, and Pamsana, all of them have been used in it. I will only show the examples. This is of early Chalukyan, and this is later Chalukyan Dravida Vimana. You can see the Shukanasa here. And this is a Hoysala monument of the Dravidian tradition. How transformation has taken place, you can notice here. See, Latina or single Ekanda type of temples and Shekari forms are also there. This is Rashtrakuta temple at Patadakal, Kashi Vishveshwara. This is Umapur in Bidar district, Kalyan Chalukya, Senkor region. You have a Nagara temple like this. Okay. Then we have a Shekari temple also in Hangal. Okay. So all these temples have been built even in later period that you have noticed. Even Bhumija temples were built in Karnataka, as you can see here. This is the this is the famous Belur temple, which does not have a superstructure today, but this photograph was taken in 1850s when that superstructure, brick and mortar brick superstructure was there at Belur, Chanakeshava temple. This is another Hoysala temple of Bhumija order. This Vamsana temple, as I told you, has continued. This is Mallikarjuna temple, which I showed you. These are later temples, Hoysala and Kalyan Chalukya. So this is the situation at the end of between the 10th and 14th centuries. Bhumija Nagara traditions in Maharashtra are very strong. In Karnataka, you have Dravida, Pamsana, Nagara in that order. So Dravida is more, Pamsana less than that, and Nagara still less than that, but they are there very much. Dravida, Pamsana, and Bhumija. Okay, here in the lower region. Of course, in that order, Dravida is more, Pamsana is less, and Bhumija is still less. So, thank you very much.